Okay. So, Alan, first question here. Can you merge tools to improve results cost ratios? For example, do LiDAR transects with SAR area to calibrate SAR data?
Hello. So for the first questions, yes, you can merge tools to improve results and cost ratio. And a good idea would be using your LiDAR DTM, which is you just only need to capture this once. And then use your other metrics or your DSM, for example, from SAR and from LiDAR. And then you can do this repeatedly because, as we might all know, satellite data sets are frequently captured, and these are recurring regularly, so you can have measurements that are within a span of days, months, or years. And for example, LiDAR transects with SAR area to calibrate SAR data. So this is theoretically possible, but I think if you're doing this, it will be very localized, which is because you are doing it in an empirical way. So this will be very localized to your area, and we don't know how this will affect in terms of time and other parameters to consider.
Thank you. Next question. Tara, it's for you. In the US, you can buy a device that attaches to a mobile phone that will detect diseases. Can you comment on this?
Yep. Does this one work? Okay. Yes, that is correct. That is for particularly the tomato species, as well as other horticulture species. So that is the foundation that we know that we can build these devices, these lightweight, low devices, and put them on drones. We'll be using different technology than what the phone base is using.
Okay. Ewan, how do you calibrate your model to physiological variables, traditional statistics or machine learning?
That's a good question. At the moment, traditional statistics. But actually, even when I was doing my PhD, I considered using neural nets instead of stats. But they were pretty primitive in those days. But I've been excited by some of the things I've seen at this conference. And I think it'd be worthwhile having a look at some machine learning approaches.
Okay. Ellen, I've got a question for you. You referred to the complexity of processing required of the synthetic aperture. Is that something that companies here in the room could do, or does it require specialist processing capacity?
I'm not sure. But in terms of the study that we have done, we actually had a collaboration with Dr. Henrik Persson from Sweden, who is very expert in these types of data processing, and it would be nice to have this type of expertise here, especially for forestry applications.
Are there any questions from the floor? No? Ewan, I've got... Oh, here's a question for you. How would your approach differ from the phenotyping system presented yesterday?
Okay, that's a big question. Differs quite substantially. The phenotyping system is very heavily dependent on collecting large amounts of data and then using machine learning in some cases to interrogate the data. Whereas the approach I'm using is, or that we're using in our team is to posit, first of all, how trees grow and dive into studies that look at the underlying processes of tree growth and then postulate what the consequences should be. And then the purpose of the data collection is to test to see whether our model is right or not. And so there are fundamentally different approaches, but I think that there's a bit of overlap and there's certainly room for collaboration. One of the most important things I think we need to collaborate on is where are we going with permanent sample plots? And how are we going to establish permanent sample plot or the equivalence of permanent sample plots in the future? Because traditionally we've just gone out there with a D-tape and a vertex or with an Abney level when I was a kid. You're measuring tree heights and diameters and you paint trees and it's all very expensive and nobody really enjoys paying for it. And now we have these new technologies that enable us to collect data. And so we need to think about the quality of the data and the way in which the data might be used and the way in which the models might be used. So I think there's a really interesting project there to redesign our permanent sample plot system, combining people from both camps.
Well, thank you very much, all three of you. If there's no more questions, we'll draw the session to a close. I'd just like to ask people to show their appreciation to the presenters in the usual way. I presume Russell was